All right, today is a lot more stuff like what we did yesterday, working with rates. Specifically, we're going to focus on unit rates here, and we're going to do a couple of things that are a little bit different than what we did yesterday, but a lot of it is going to look kind of similar. But we are going to talk a little bit more specifically about unit rates and hopefully notice how useful they are, how important they are. Okay, so it says here, unit rates are special rates where one of the quantities is being compared is 1. So the denominator is 1. We see these all the time in the real world. So a couple of examples here are 50 kilometers per hour, $15 per person, $2 per chocolate bar. All of those things are how much it is for one item or how fast you're going in 1 hour or something like that. Meters per second, another speed, is another unit rate. How far are you going in 1 second? Okay, so those are our unit rates. And order really matters. So we don't just do it the order that they're necessarily written on the page or that they're written in the question. We got to think about which one makes more sense. In some cases, you might be able to get away with either, but generally speaking, one of them makes more sense. So here we have 2 examples, and we have either $0.25, which is 25 cents per cookie, or 4 cookies per dollar. Which one of those would be a more common way of doing things? So think about it, make your own choice. And then I would say it's this one. Now the other one is possible. You might be at a bake sale and they're selling 4 cookies for $1. Like that could be, and by the way, those are both the same price, right? 25 cents for 1 cookie or 4 cookies for $1. Those are the same price, just written as different rates. So you in this case, you kind of could see each, but the per cookie is the more typical way that we would see it in a store, in a grocery store, something like that. Okay, this is another good example. You could either have, so this is speed, you could either have 50 kilometers per hour or 0.02 hours per kilometer. Which one of those is more familiar, sort of makes more sense? And again, I think it's the top one, 50 kilometers per hour. That's a common speed that you see on speed limit signs for driving. And 0.02 hours per kilometer, if you saw that, you probably wouldn't even know. I wouldn't even know what that means. I would not have context. I'd have to do some math and figure out that that is also equal to 50 kilometers per hour. There's one situation marathon runners or long distance runners would use a measurement like this. So how many minutes does it take them to run each kilometer? And they're running 10 kilometers or 20 kilometers or something like that. So again, there are situations where you might flip things around. But for us, we're going to keep it pretty straightforward. And typically, we're going to use the one that's most familiar in this case, like I said, 50 kilometers per hour. Okay, so we're going to practice just making some unit rates. We did some of this yesterday when we were comparing. That was one thing that we noticed, that if you're comparing costs for like a sale cost with the regular cost, or a package of pop that comes in 18 cans or 24 cans or 12 cans, and comparing which one is cheapest. One way of doing it is by calculating each as a unit rate, seeing how much it is for 1 can. Okay, so we have already seen this. We're just getting into it a little bit deeper. So in this case, are we going to do dollars per cookie or cookies per dollar? We kind of already talked about this, and we said dollars per cookie. And one takeaway from this is always think about that. And even in your head, say it both ways. Dollars per cookie, cookies per dollar. Which one sounds better? So if it's dollars per cookie, it's $3.15, and all I do is divide. Okay, so with the calculator, 315 divided by 9. And again, I want the decimal. We don't like fractions when we're talking about money. So it looks like we have, $0.35 per cookie. So for this, we're going to definitely always include units. And so make sure that you do that, right? Because it's important. We're talking about actual things in the world, so we're always going to include units. And the units in this is always something per something with that slash. How is this related to proportions and stuff that we've been talking about? There is another way that you could do it, and this always works. That's why one of the reasons why proportions are so powerful. If it's 15 for 9, how much is it for 1? And so again, I draw my line, and I get x equals 3.15 times 1 divided by 9. But multiplying by 1 doesn't do anything, so we're doing the same thing that we did over here, 3.15 divided by 9, and we would still get 0.35. So you can do it either way, but the nice thing about unit rates is you don't have to do the extra step. We know we're just dividing. Okay? You just have to make sure you divide in the right order based on the unit that you're using, dollars per cookie or cookies per dollar. Dollars per cookie means you're doing dollars divided by cookies. Now, same thing. Do we want cans per dollar or dollars per can? Which one? Cans per dollar or dollars per can? And dollars almost always goes on top. So I think we want that one. So this one was written out of order in the question. That's like what I was saying before. You don't want to just you don't want to just do it in the order that the question is written. You want to think about what the order should be. So if it's dollars divided by cans, I start with dollars. And divide by cans. $0.98. 98 cents per can. In 7 days, Dave made $5.95. Now, it doesn't necessarily say that he made the same amount every day, but if he wants to average it out, it's still how much was he making sort of on average per day, right? So again, would this be days per dollar or dollars per day? And we're going with dollars per day. Dollars on top again. Again, very common. So $5.95 divided by 7 days. $85 per day. If you did days per dollar, you would get a really strange answer. How many days do you have to work to earn $1? Well, like a fraction of a day. You're working for like a few minutes to earn $1. So it really would be a meaningless value if you calculated it that way. You'd look at it and be like, I don't really know what that means. But $85 per day is something that we all fully understand. Okay? And so that's why the order really matters when we're dividing and thinking about which unit that we're going to use. Okay, so that's how we calculate unit rates. As I said, we've already talked about that a little bit and seen that a little bit, just focusing a little bit more on the fact that these are unit rates. And there's something special about unit rates on the next page. It says at the top, they're great because they're really easy to use. And so if I have a unit rate, this is why things are often given in unit rates. If I have a unit rate, I can quickly figure out, I can use it to calculate other things. So for example, if I'm driving 100 kilometers per hour, then I know how far I'm going to go in 2 hours or 3 hours or 4 hours. It's really easy to do that. Okay. If I knew my speed in some weird way, like I'm traveling 175 kilometers in 2.5 hours, that's a lot harder to use. It doesn't really make any sense. But if it's per 1 hour, or if it's $2 per one chocolate bar, and I buy 5 chocolate bars, it's easy to figure out what the total cost is going to be. So that's why unit rates are so useful, and you see them everywhere. Okay, so we're going to find the unit rate, and then we're going to see what it looks like to use it. And some of you, maybe most of you, will have a really good intuition on how you use them. But if you don't, I'm going to show you another way that you can do it using proportions that will always, always, always work. And in this course, something that you're going to notice a common theme is you're going to have multiple strategies. I'm going to show you multiple strategies, or I might show you one, but you've got another way that you think you like to do, which check with me to make sure that your way makes sense. But you will have multiple strategies in how to solve questions, and it's up to you to pick which one you like, and then practice using that one, and then you'll be ready for assessments or ready to use it in real life, because often there are multiple, maybe subtly different ways of doing things, but still everybody's different, and one way that clicks really well for one person may not click really well for somebody else. So this is similar to the last example, but in this case, Ted made $645 in 10 days. So again, we're going to do dollars per day. Always think about dollars per day or days per dollar. Which way are you going? So if I'm doing dollars divided by days, I do 645 divided by 10. Oh, bring up my calculator, which for some reason doesn't want to come up. Okay, and 645 divided by 10. That one you might be able to do in your head. Obviously, if you can ever do it in your head, go for it. I always add the extra zero at the end when we're talking about money, because it would be weird to write it as $64.5. It's $64.50, right? So $645 in 10 days is $64.50 in 1 day. Whoops, $64 in 1 day. I'm not going to write that every time, but just, make a note of it. That's what that means. That's a unit rate. So we've calculated the unit rate. Now that we know how much Ted makes in a day, as long as he's consistent, we can easily use that to figure out any number. So this question is asking for 25 days. And it's really easy. All we do, if it's $64.50 for 1 day, what do you think? What do we do? Think about it for yourself for a second. So again, some of you will have the intuition of what to do here, but some of you might not. And if you have that intuition, great, then you're going to find this easy. But if not, you can either kind of memorize it, or you could use the other strategy. So $64.50 for 1 day. How much in 25 days? To find this, we just multiply by 25 days. Just like $2 for 1 candy bar. How much for 5 candy bars? 2 times 5 is 10. $10. Again, you probably have a gut feeling about that. You kind of just know that it's $10. $2 for 1 candy bar, 5 candy bars is $10. But that is multiplication. That's the operation that you're doing. So that works out to $64.50 times 25. $1,612.50 for 25 chocolate bars. Okay. What's the other way that we could do it? We could set up a proportion. If we didn't have to find the unit rate, then it's up to you. If you have to find the unit rate and you know how to use it, you might as well, because it's a little bit easier. You're just multiplying. But if you're not asked to find the unit rate, or even if you are, you just like doing it this way instead, it doesn't say in the question, use the unit rate. It just says how much for 25 days. So we can set up a proportion. So it's $64.50 for one, I'm going to go back to the original one. I'm not going to use the unit rate. I'm going to go back and use the original information. So $645 in 10 days. Okay, is going to be how much in 25 days. So then I solve my proportion, and I get X equals 645 times 25 divided by 10. And if I do that, I get the same answer. Okay, so either's fine. Again, like I said, there are multiple strategies that work. And a big part of this course is you decide what you're comfortable with, what you prefer, and you do it your way. Okay, but if you make up your own way, like I said, you got to check with me and make sure that it's a way that makes sense. Because sometimes people come up with methods that work sometimes, but not all the time. And so we need to use methods that always work. Okay, example 3, which is our last example. Ned makes $620 an 8-hour. Jed makes $585 in 6 hours. How much does each make per hour? So I'm going to do these separately, and I'm going to do little titles so that I can follow my work, and somebody else can look at my work and understand what I'm doing. So this is always a good idea, kind of something you have to do, especially on an assessment or an assignment. Just a little title to show what you're doing. To find Ned's, again, we're doing dollars per hour. Okay, there we go. And again, dollars per hour. So 620 divided by 8. Whoops, 620. It's pretty good. That's another common one. The other ones were dollars per day. This is dollars per hour. So that's another common unit of measurement for your income, for how much money you make. And then Jed is $585 in 6 hours. We talked about this yesterday. Who's making more? This is a good example of it's hard to tell. Now, if you're good at estimating or if you're good at doing kind of mental math, you might be able to look at this and kind of figure it out, but you'd have to think a little bit. It's not necessarily clear right away, and sometimes it's really close and it's really hard to tell who's making more money or which is the better paying job. So if we convert them both to unit rates, then we can tell for sure which one is better. And it turns out, looks like this one is about $20 more per hour. How much would Ned make in 20 hours? Okay, so we're going to take Ned's, multiply by 20. So $1,550. Okay. And then finally, how long would it take Jed to make $975? This one's a little bit trickier. Again, I'm going to do this in 2 ways, and this one is trickier. So whenever it's slightly differently worded, not like this one where you can just multiply, because this one gives you the number of hours, so you can multiply. But if you're not sure, then we fall back on setting up a proportion. So I'm going to show both ways of using a proportion. Where you use the unit rate or you use the original amount. And you can pick either. You just have to make sense of what you're doing. And in this case, I think it makes it the easiest way is to use a proportion. So Jed makes $585 in 6 hours. So again, I'm doing dollars over hours. So I still have to do dollars, which is $975 over hours. $10 hours to make $975. Or I could have used the unit rate, that would be totally fine. So that's $970 per hour. $97.50 per hour. Sorry, I don't know what I'm thinking. $97.50 in 1 hour. $975 in how many hours? In this case, using the unit rate's not really easier, I don't think. Same answer, of course. Yeah, I don't think that the unit rate is really easier, so going back and using the original information from the question might make more sense, but either way, you know, again, it's up to you. Very similar, if you compare those two, they're very similar in how you set it up and how you type it into your calculator, that kind of thing, just slightly different numbers. Okay, so again, today's focus is reviewing how you determine a unit rate, which we already talked about. Now we've talked about it a little bit more, but then also how do you use a unit rate, like in that example where you can just multiply by 20 because it's asking for 20 hours and you know how much for 1 hour, so multiply by 20. Okay, but then the other takeaway is when in doubt, set up a proportion, because that always works.